The other thing I want to talk about is the appropriations process. And now most federal agencies are in the process of developing their budgets for the fiscal year 2012. And there are a number of provisions in the Path Forward report that relate to existing fellowship programs across a variety of agencies. And that's what I'm showing on this slide here. As you all know, there are fellowship programs at NSF, at NIH, at the Department of Energy, and the Department of Education. One of the recommendations in the Path Forward report is that all of these existing federal fellowship programs should be continued and supported. Even though we have recommendations for new programs, the Doctoral Competes program and a new innovative master's program, we want to continue the programs that we have. And so as part of in our own advocacy efforts and thinking about appropriations, we want to make sure to talk about these existing programs because many of these have not seen increases, and we would like to see increases in these, even though we understand it's a very tough budget climate. And speaking of the tough budget climate, I do think that next year will be very tough for at the federal budget level, and I think a number of these fellowship programs may in fact be in jeopardy. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to urge all of us to make sure to talk about the importance of these programs. The programs at NSF, I think, are pretty, are okay because the president is very supportive of NSF, and there's a proposed bump up in the NSF budget over the next 7 years, and that includes GRF and IGERT programs. But I think that at some of the other federal agencies, there's going to be an examination of where some cuts could be made, and we certainly do not want to see those cuts coming to graduate fellowship programs. I took a look at the Illinois congressional delegation and thought it might be useful just to take a look at it from the perspective of the members of that delegation and their representation on various committees. And of course, it's wonderful that we have people here today from Senator Durbin's office and Congressman Johnson's office. Senator Durbin, of course, is the Assistant Majority Leader, and he's a member of the Appropriations Committee. And I was just talking about the need to put a focus on the FY12 appropriations process and support for graduate education. So obviously, he's a very key person. In the House, there are 2 representatives from Illinois who are on the Appropriations Committee, Jesse Jackson and Mark Stephen Kirk. Looking at the Science and Technology Committee, there are 3 people from your congressional delegation on that committee. Science and Technology is a very important committee because in the House, that's the committee that had jurisdiction over the Competes bill. They were very active in getting that bill through their committee and ultimately to the House floor and through the House. The chairman of that committee is Bart Gordon from Tennessee, and he is retiring from Congress at the end of this year. Jerry Costello would be the next person in line to become the chairman of that committee if the House stays Democratic. Other members of the committee include Judy Biggert and Dan Lipinski, both of whom have been longtime supporters of STEM education and STEM higher education. Education and Labor Committee in the House has jurisdiction over higher education programs. Again, 2 people from your state, Judy Biggert and Phil Hare, on that committee. And the other committee that's relevant is Energy and Commerce, because the Department of Energy is one of the departments that has been, over the past couple of years, showing increased interest in graduate education and in trying to get more money for graduate fellowships at their agency. And I've listed your members of Congress who are on that committee. So in closing, I'd just like to say, you know, what we've been trying to do at the Council of Graduate Schools through this report, as well as other reports that we've developed in the past, is provide data and recommendations, policy recommendations, to highlight the essential role of graduate education in developing the talent we need to be successful now and into the future. And it's up to all of us to make it happen. We have the 3 sectors here in this room that can work together to do that, and look forward to working with all of you on this, and I'd be happy to answer any questions and discussion from here on forward. So thank you.
Okay, at this point we will open the floor to any questions that you might have, not only the panelists, but also amongst ourselves. Dave Wilson? Sorry.
We had a former governor who once discussed, was talking about the value of higher education. And I believe that his comment was is that he could see how public education was a private benefit to an individual as they could earn more income through their life and so on. But for the life of him, he said, he didn't understand how it was a benefit to the state of Illinois. I'm just curious, how do we get past this whole idea of private versus public good versus private benefit, and what role does that play in the public debate?
I would say that it is, I would agree with him that it is a private gain for the individual to go forward. And to kind of use the example I mentioned earlier of the factory owner, he started his company in 1996 with 25 employees, and now is up to about 180, 190 employees. And of those, the number that he has doing the technical work where a master's degree would be required, the engineering work, the design, the planning work, the more he's able to grow, the more he can add to those positions, the more people you have who are remaining in Illinois, or more importantly, coming back to Illinois. And this, you know, I think is true for any state and for the country in general. If you start to give these incentives and you start to help these businesses grow on that technical level, you're going to find a lot more people more willing to invest the time and resources to develop that side of their business or that side of that side of our economy to make sure we're retaining those high individuals. And I think from there, you know, the public benefit is, I would say, pretty apparent. You start to get more people living in your community, which is more people putting money into your local and state and federal tax pool. You start to develop more a sense of community than you would by somebody who's coming in and, well, okay, the company might not be around, they might not expand. Let's go somewhere else where I have better opportunity. I think that is kind of the general way it would come to be more of a public good as opposed to just the private gain.
Just a follow-up, then, do you think that the economic argument is stronger than the more intrinsic value of having an educated, culturally literate population, and the value of that? I worry about the next generation not being as educated as our generation, for example, and what that might mean in public discourse and just quality of life. Does that factor into the conversation at all?
I don't think that one is necessarily better than the other. But as an example, on the way down here, I was listening to the radio, and Brazil came up in terms of agriculture. And what our person was talking about was Brazil is not where you would think they'd be growing corn or grain or anything along those lines. But they specifically mentioned that Brazil back in the 70s had sent all of these students here to the U.S. to get their advanced degrees, to get their PhDs, went back and helped develop a strain of agriculture that could grow there. So now you have people who have come here, they've used it, and they've now left. Kind of tie that in, part of what I mentioned earlier about the undergraduate, making sure you have that diverse pool, is making sure when people come here from Brazil or China or insert any part of the world, make sure they stay here. A lot of them do want to stay here, and one of the things that does come up is increasing that visa pool and making sure we can retain those individuals. From the university side, you've spent all this time, all this money, getting them up to that higher education level, to that, point where they can now go out and do something. And they've definitely brought, I would say, a cultural side of the table. I would say the unfortunate reality of that is that is something that gets tied up into the whole immigration debate overall, and unfortunately is lost. So a lot of that cultural stuff that I believe you're referring to it's there, but because of the dual nature of everything, nothing is ever its own policy. It's lost in the shuffle.